Good morning, everybody. Hope yesterday was a stimulating day, and today promises to be even more so, I hope. I have the privilege of introducing Jill Houghton, who is the Executive Director of the U.S. Business Leadership Network. And Jill is a colleague of mine. We've done work together for, I don't know, at least 8 years now, give or take, maybe a little longer. And she is a real expert in the employment of people with disabilities and on the employment of veterans with disabilities. And the Institute for Veterans and Military Families now has a great partnership with USBLN, which is focused on small businesses that are owned by service-disabled veterans and certification for that along with their other certifications so that people with disabilities who are business owners can be suppliers. Jill is working with many Fortune 100, Fortune 500 companies and with their disability affinity groups, and the work that she's been doing is really groundbreaking with many of those. Interestingly, one of the things that I've seen here is that companies with outstanding leadership in the disability world translate that very quickly into leadership in the military veteran community, and they translate a lot of those lessons. So Jill has a tremendous expertise in that and can make connections with folks throughout all levels of leadership and human resources and others. So please tap into her as a resource after this session as well. And with that, I'm going to turn it to Jill, and she'll introduce our esteemed panelists. Jill? Thanks very much.
Thank you, James, and thank you to the Institute on Veterans and Military Families. We love partnering with you. So you're in for a real treat today. We have an esteemed panel. To my left here, we have Assistant Secretary Keith Kelly with the Veterans and Employment and Training Services, or VETS, we like to refer to them, at the U.S. Department of Labor. Assistant Secretary Kelly was just recently sworn in on January 22nd of 2013. VETS is a focal point for veteran employment by preparing military service members for transition to civilian employment, providing veterans the services to assist them with getting good jobs and protecting their employment rights. Assistant Secretary comes to us from Montana, from a very beautiful part of the country, and we talked a little bit about that. He's got a long, esteemed background, including that he was appointed by President Clinton as the administrator of the Farm Services Agency, and prior to that, he served as the director of Montana Department of Agriculture and as Montana's Deputy Secretary of State. He also served as and was a director in Arizona. Assistant Secretary Keith Kelly, welcome. We're going to allow you to provide comments and talk to us about decoding and demystifying the services of VETS and how business and industry can partner and the nonprofit community can partner with VETS as well. You can pick your preference.
Okay, well, I will stand. Maybe let me do that. I've decided to stand because at least I know this speaker works and all the tech stuff we get at these things, so I think I'll sit here. So, but good morning all. I met many of you yesterday evening. As far as the resume and introducing me, is all it proves that you have to move a lot of times to outrun your reputation, your job. So I moved around a lot in life, from Montana to Arizona to Washington, back to Montana. And a Montana native and a history primarily in the agriculture industry, but I promise not to talk about cows and weeds. So we're going to talk about things of a real importance here today. And I want to just highlight something last night. Speaker Gingrich you had here that made some comments here. And the message I took there as I arrived, just as he was well into his speech, was, you know, it really takes a village. It's just about what he said. All of you that are out here in the private sector, big business, small business, 501c3, VA, Department of Defense, vets in the Department of Labor, to sit here and assist of the challenge that we had before us right at this time. So I thought the speaker really was spot on, for lack of a better word, in some of the issues that were raised last night. I'm here in this position in part. I'm a veteran from the Vietnam era, and some of his comments were about us Vietnam veterans. Do we get it quite with what we got with Iraqi and Afghanistan veterans? That was a different period of our history in our country, and That issue's behind us, 45 years. The transitions were made as difficult or as easy or as challenging they were, and we worked through that. Most recently, I've been in Montana running the Department of Labor and Industry for 8 years under Governor Brian Schweitzer. And in that capacity, I had, from unemployment insurance, job service offices, wage and hour, workers' comp, and certainly all the VETS programs that were in the Department of Labor and Industry is there associated with our American Job Centers. So I had some familiarity of some of the things that we're talking about here as we're coming forward today. And Montana, it's a very rural state. If you visited and I think we have 3 cows for every human being there. We're a little less than 1 million people. And in that, we have a very high percentage that are veterans and scattered in a very rural setting. So just very quickly, the goals of the VETS. There's 4 things that have kind of highlighted as going forward here. And our charge, my charge here to our staff and all, is to improve the outreach to service members, veterans, and their stakeholders, all of you here, to ensure we are aware and have the access to the programs and services available to help them achieve their employment and career goals and good jobs. Number 2, to sustain and bolster intensive employment services with those that have significant barriers to employment. And this is very much the audience that we are talking about here today. We have a very specific programs within the VETS of the U.S. Department of Labor. 3 is to fully implement and continuously improve the redesigned workshop portion. I'll refer to that later. The workshop portion of TAP, and you've all heard about TAP with some familiarity. I think Speaker Gingrich talked about that. It really is, we continue to partner with Veterans Affairs, Defense, Homeland Security, SBA, and some others in that by implementing the redesigned employment workshop. Now, some of you have said that I think had not seen a TAP workshop, and at some point to see it, we're getting very high marks on what the new improved TAP program is out there to provide for veterans. And it's mandatory. That's a big change from the past with professional counselors providing, professional educators providing the service. So at least to get a touch on these veterans before they even depart from the service, to ensure they're aware of the programs available for them out there. And lastly, to increase and enhance VETS' ability to measure and report the impact of our programs, and it's a constant challenge in government, is to improve the data collection we have out there and reporting so that we are able to report back to our bosses, to Congress, to the other end of Pennsylvania Avenue, that we are hitting our mark on what we're trying to do with the investments made out there. I just wanted to highlight a couple of things also associated with the U.S. Department of Labor is the Bureau of Labor Statistics, which tracks all unemployment from on a monthly basis. Overall, veterans' employment rate for men has dropped now down to 6.9%. This is from the 2012 level. So it's a slow recovery, but it is a recovery, and it's down under 7%. I think we got spoiled on 3 and 4% unemployment back several years ago, and we think that's a standard. A good economist would always say 6% unemployment is kind of the standard, but regardless, it's too high in this economy, and it is a slow recovery. Veterans with service-connected disabilities and unemployment rate is actually a little bit better. It's a 6.5% unemployment rate. If that's good, I've got to state that correctly, but if 6.5 is good, but it's less than many of the others out there. The Gulf War era 2 veterans had an unemployment rate of 10.9%, not so good. And that's a little different from the previous year, so it hasn't moved very much. Unemployment rates for young veterans, this 18 to 34 category that we're still trying to capture, still remains much higher than their civilian counterparts. And probably understandable, as somebody took a detour and went into the service providing for all of us our safety and liberties. As they took this detour, others stayed on the path and started moving up a career ladder or enhancing in their jobs or enhancing in education going forward. Another big issue within that, and it doesn't fit totally in here, but I will share with you, is women's veteran. This is not your daddy's military, and I'm speaking about this age, daddy's military. Women in the military are now a major and a permanent component of that. And their unemployment rate, unfortunately, is 8.3%, and it is higher than both the male veterans and the women non-veteran counterparts. So there's a challenge before all of us here with this ever-changing face of the military. In addition, the Guard and Reserve kind of add to that as well as what the new military looks like. Most women veterans are employed by the government or work in education and health care industries. That's where their primary vocations end up. And the Department of Labor recognized the imminent need to step up the plate on tackling women's veteran unemployment. And it is one of our top strategic policy issues regarding veteran unemployment during the FY13 and beyond. Veteran employment, not unemployment, the unemployment to be solved. The Department of Labor has a team comprised of an active duty Air Force officer, a spouse of a veteran, and a leader in gender employment issues, and a program analyst from the Historic Women's Bureau to establish Women's Veteran Initiative, that is. And those initiatives are identifying the distinct challenges for women's veteran employment issues, identifying what the Department of Labor Services are required to close that gap, and elevating this issue to ensure maximum impact. And I just will remind us all a little bit of a history lesson. The U.S. Department of Labor, I'm housed in the Francis Perkins Building. She's the very first female cabinet member in the U.S. government under FDR. So not to be surprising, we're in there very aggressively attacking the women's issues as we're going forward. And this lady has just been detailed to us from the Women's Bureau 3 weeks ago. One of our primary programs, our bread and butter, is the JVSG, the Jobs for Veterans State Grant Programs, and that's where we go out with the 50 states and American Job Centers and employ DVOPs and leavers. I hope that's the name you all recognize, the acronyms there. And it's just based on, the demographics. Over 1.3 million veterans age 18 to 44 are expected to use this American Job Center here in the next coming years, and with that, over 1 million are entitled to intensive services, and of that 1 million, over 325,000 of them are expected to have significant barriers to employment, and that can be anything from traumatic brain injury, PTSD, or all of the other types of disabilities that have resulted out of Iraq and Afghanistan. And so it's no secret, if you just look at the demographics and the growth, we do need more resources to meet this regrettably growing demand. The message and the value of the veteran rings clear and loud in the whole department. It's not only in ours, but in our fellow agencies that help support us as we're going forward as well. For our TAP employment workshop, our budget request was increased to allow us to administer all of our expected employment workshops. Just again, the demographics are there. And in the 14 budget going forward, we did get an increase of $38 million in our JVSG grants. That's a pretty significant increase. I did the math at one time. It was about 15% jump in that whole area, which is going to give us a lot more resources to put out on the field to assist with the veterans. And so we will be able to do a better job of increasing the level of intensive service through our DVOPs that are scattered throughout all over America. Right now we have about 1,000 DVOPs and 1,000 leavers. Disabled veterans is the focus on the DVOPs. And with that, we have to recognize too, we're going to be reaching new populations of service members and their families. That's women in the military, that's Guard and Reserve as well. So that's an expanding pool of people that are going to be needing our services. Now the last part I want to just focus on a little bit is our America Heroes at Work. This is a publication that we put out. We're working to really update it that specifically addresses veterans with disabilities and to help the business community, employers, and everybody else understand more about traumatic brain injury, PTSD, and other things in hiring veterans, and some things we need to look out for. I will say and acknowledge we're updating this up there to make it more robust, to try to keep current out there with the information that's more meaningful and whatnot for people to look at there. But it's just common employer questions to ask, and the misperception, may be the word, or misunderstanding what is out there with regard to somebody in employing a veteran and what other challenges may have. And many of them are really quite easy. There's a lot of adjustments. Maybe there's a disconnect with the private sector, the business world, and others, and I know many of you are working on this, to say that disconnect isn't really that far apart. These people really bring some other assets forward to this going forward. So it's designed to better understand. Their employers can read information on various cases, such as traumatic brain injury or PTSD, and to get a better understanding of all things. Also, America Heroes at Work provides a toolkit to provide information and strategies on how employers can hire these veterans who are disabled. And then another major effort initiative we're working on with VA and the Department of Defense is to work continually to try to get us, there's a plethora of information, almost a spider web out there, a veteran career portal. Our lane or our responsibilities in the employment and training area of that, that's where the Department of Labor, from its inception, had a very long history out there in helping employ and train people, period. Now, this is a focus specifically on employing and training veterans that are transitioning out of a much different environment into a civilian workforce. And it's just the concept, it's in the conceptual stages. We're working with VA and Defense at the current time and to consolidate and simplify the federal employment advice to veteran service members and their spouses. That's internally within the federal government. And then the department will harness the site to use the various current tools that are out there and linkages with the various state workforce agencies to translate those skills, to build a resume, to post jobs, and even learn how to interview for a job. There is a pretty significant cultural difference in a military background and in a civilian life background when interviewing and presenting ourselves for employment. And so our goal certainly would be that we meet all of the users. It's kind of supply and demand, employers out there and veterans out there, and how do we make the match they're out there. And with more high-tech touch than we have perhaps used in the past. And just for your information, nationwide there's about 2,700 American Job Centers out there of where our DevOps and leavers are co-located in a part of that whole infrastructure out there. And those American Job Centers, the Employment Training Administration, they're charged as well to give priority of service to veterans who come through the doors. Ours will get down to be more specific, and as I say, those that have substantial barriers to employment, specific programs and trained people. Another web government resources are out there, and you probably know some of them, you've probably been on many of them. The National Resource Directory, nrdc.gov, and the disability.gov. And this website on disability.gov is comprehensive information on disability programs and services in communities nationwide. Another one, a little bit aside, is that the Department of Labor runs the Family Medical Leave Act. Now, what does that have to do with this? And we're talking about people with disabilities. How many parents are sitting there have lost their homes or almost themselves taking care of for a son or daughter that's come back that's been seriously wounded in Iraq or Afghanistan, has to retrofit a house or any of the various things that go on there. And under this rule, eligible workers can take up to 26 work weeks of leave for current service members with serious illnesses or injuries to help that transition. That's a big part of it. That's even as Speaker Gingrich was last night, not the previous Speaker Gingrich, Mr. Gingrich, who spoke last night, how he said it just takes everybody involved in this, and it certainly involves the family in this. I certainly met some others that are really challenged. They've struggled trying to and testifying in Congress with a very seriously handicapped child that is son or daughter that is going through the transition that needs to be retrained and get rehabilitated, put back into the workforce, and they've nearly bankrupted themselves in the process. And so that's going to make it hopefully easier for families going forward. We also have been charged within the VETS program of the Department of Labor in hiring veterans for federal service. And I mentioned the TAP program and the TAP employment. Our partners are sitting right here at the table and can go much more greater detail. We own 3 days of that program, and that's in the training, getting job ready, resume finding, looking on job boards, and learning how to interview for jobs and whatnot. And so the new improved TAP program is out there. The vets will look at the Veterans Training Institute out in Denver, Colorado, to enhance for our DevOps and leavers to see what more can be done to steer veterans to federal employment. I mean, this is a good deal. If we're sitting here passing judgment on the private sector and everybody else, maybe we have to look in our own house and make sure we're meeting the standards. And I think you all recall a couple of years ago when all this charge was out there that we were a little bit short ourselves on that, we, the federal government. And so the vets will develop these things going forward to provide guidance to encourage the system, and those American Job Center staffs are working with them, those 2,700 locations. Rough math, there's got to be 20,000, 30,000 people out there in America with a public-private partnership. They're managed at the state level, and that, to me, it's been, since I did that before, is a good public-private partnership with the federal government and the states to do some of the things. And with that, there's a website out there, USA Jobs, to sit here and be able to look at for employment as well. And the vets are going to develop and train a trainer package for the veteran service organizations to help train their staff to apply for federal jobs and use USA Jobs. And we will work with the Office of Personnel Management to integrate the big boogaboo sometimes is the translator. You know, what does 11 Bravo mean in the military? How does that translate into the civilian life? And so there's many things on the front. I'm still going to go back to the key message. You're seeing three of us up here, but the one, it's taken a little bit from all of us to figure this out. And I think the speaker, something that stuck with me, and I even wrote it on my card last night, that how do we have to ensure that we don't end up with a system that can kind of create a dependency and almost be a hindrance for them moving forward because we throw this and this and this program, you stitch something together. We're going to be faced with this for the life of many of these veterans. So this is a 40 or 60 year time frame on that. And to help really get the transition into a full productive civilian life so they can sit there and add to our society and economy without getting caught up with some of the dependency that may be available. I thought that was a telling comment to me, and I had never looked or thought of it that way. But so with that, I'll conclude my remarks here, and then you can ask the tough questions to the next two or three gentlemen that come up. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Assistant Secretary Kelly. I definitely heard a spirit of collaboration, and it sounds like VETS is collaborating with lots of partners and also collaborating with the private sector. One of the things that caught my attention was, did I hear you say that there's 2,700 America's Job Centers and that they will see over 325,000 service-disabled veterans? I think that was something you called out at the beginning.
Yeah, that's correct. There's 2,700 American Job Centers scattered in the states, and when I said the 325,000, that's those with significant barriers to employment. That may be the traumatic brain injuries, severely handicapped, PTSD, and that's where we're focusing our piece inside of the American Job Centers on those people that really do have a bigger hill to climb, for lack of a better word.
Wow, excellent. So without further ado, our next speaker went to work today thinking that his day was going to be something completely different than it has turned out to be, because here he is and joining us on this panel. So thank you, Reginald Gladney, for doing other duties as assigned. Reginald Gladney is the Assistant Director for Oversight and Outreach at the Veterans Administration. He's been there for 9 years. We found out that we have something in common. We're both from Kansas. He is responsible for the implementation and delivery of their employment services at their regional offices across the country. He's responsible for their outreach. Like, now, you know, this is like a sea of acronyms, right? We're just going to hear acronym of their IDES initiative. And I'm probably supposed to say like the IDES initiative. And Vets on Success on Campus program and their marketing and quality assurance program. So without further ado, Reginald, thank you.
All right. Thank you very much. If you guys don't mind, I'll sit down for a minute. I just want to give you a quick overview of what vocational rehabilitation and employment services, basically the program in general, and also just to kind of tell you a little bit about myself. I've been actually in the field of vocational rehabilitation for about 18 years now. Started off in state rehab, actually in the state of Missouri, and entered the VA in 2004. So I've only been with VA since 2004 as a vocational rehabilitation counselor, then as a manager in Chicago, and then I've been here in DC for the last 5 years. Prior to my new position, this is a new position for me as of 61 days. I was the supervisor of training for all of the counselors across counselors and managers across the country at our 56 regional offices and one national capital benefits regional office here in DC. Vocational rehabilitation and employment, what our primary objective is to assist service-connected veterans with obtaining a career that they can sustain long-term. We're not trying to just put them in any job or assist them with any job. We want to make sure that whatever career or services that we're providing for support-wise is going to be a long-term type of situation for that individual, for that veteran. So we do that by a number of different services under the program. The biggest things that the most important thing that we do is when we do find that veteran entitled for our services, we sit down with that veteran and we make sure that they understand their limitations, of course, but also help them do career guidance and counseling services. And we want to do that up front and make sure that we identify a viable career for them. Upon that time, that can include education, it could be retraining just in different job markets, obtain additional skills. We have about 5 different tracks of services that will direct that veteran towards. One is reemployment, where they're just trying to get back into maybe a career that they left. One is rapid access to employment. They have the job skills and training necessary, and we're just going to provide employment services, and we partner with Department of Labor and the DBOPs and LEBRs across the country. Another program that we do is, which we use a lot of, is our long-term employment service, which is where we have the educational track, where we may assist a veteran with obtaining a college degree, a four-year degree, a graduate degree, whatever is necessary to allow that veteran to enter that career field. And we're going to provide them the support in order to do that. And we pay for, which is a good thing about vocational rehab, we'll pay for all of their training, tuition fees. If they need a computer, we'll buy the computer. I mean, we'll make sure that they are supported throughout their educational program. And then upon that, we also have an independent living program for those veterans who are unable to, at this time, return to a employment or career field at this time. So we'll try to provide some supports, and we'll partner with the Department of VHA, the medical centers, vet centers, to make sure that they have the supports to enhance their daily living in some form or fashion, whatever the needs are for that particular veteran. And then last, of course, we have employment services that we'll provide for a veteran. We have about 83 employment coordinators across the country, again, at our 56 regional offices and one benefits office here in DC. In addition to that, we have about 900 experienced rehab counselors at these regional offices who can provide the same services as our employment coordinators. So if our employment coordinators are a little overwhelmed with just trying to go out and obtain various career options for veterans, we do have our vocational rehab counselors that can also assist. And we are looking at, and I'll just kind of transition a little bit, but what we're trying to do in employment services, we'll partner with our DBOPs and LEBRs. We'll provide job readiness skills for our veterans, but we'll also assist them with looking at resumes, developing their resumes, finding job leads. We'll go out to our, of course, federal partners first, of course, to make sure that we are tapping into the federal avenues and resources that we have that way, but also looking at our nonprofit and our community partners and businesses out there, making sure that our employment coordinators are reaching out to those individuals and really marketing our veterans for whatever career options are out there. So our employment coordinators are our people, our staff that's on the ground reaching out to all the employers regardless of what industry they're in. And then another thing I think was the outreach part of it, and because I'm over the outreach, so I have to say something about that. What we're doing now with, especially with as the drawdown and different things is going on with our military and our veterans, we are actually putting vocational rehabilitation counselors on military bases. We're partnering with DOD and some other entities to make sure that we're starting that process. If they're going to be medically discharged, they're going to be coming in out of the military, and we know that potentially they're going to have a service-connected disability or a compensation rating. We want to start a little bit early, and we want to make sure that we are doing that career guidance and support while they're in that transition period. So we are ramping up on that with our IDES program. I think last year we hired 105 VRCs, vocational rehab counselors, and we are looking to hopefully expand that another 90 in the next 2 years. We also have a Vet Success on Campus program, which we are really trying to promote right now. We're at 32 campuses, 33 campuses as of last week, with Ohio State coming on board. About 25 VRCs, where we're putting a VRC, a vocational rehab counselor, on campus. And they're doing a little bit the same thing. What their goal is to make sure that that veteran has the supports and services necessary to ensure that they're going to be able to complete their college degree. So they're that VBA resource. So they're going to be able to tell a veteran, and that veteran doesn't have to be in our Chapter 31 program, and that's the good thing. It could be any veteran that is accessing benefits from VA, or just any veteran in general that needs some additional supports or guidance. And that vocational rehab counselor will make sure that it's that warm handoff to the VHA, warm handoff to the vet centers, to make sure that they get the supports necessary in order to successfully obtain their degree at the end. And also, they'll do job marketing, and they'll go out and participate in job fairs and actually do some career guidance and outreach to employers in the community too. So we are definitely trying to ramp up a lot of our services and outreach. Outreach is a big one for us, and we are definitely looking at employers to partner with and try to locate and make sure we have some positions and jobs available for our veterans that are returning, or actually necessary. So with that, I'll close, and if anyone has questions, I'll be here to.
Excellent. The spirit of collaboration continues, talking about partnering and breaking down barriers. Very interesting about your Vet Success on Campus program. Looking forward to hearing how business can partner with those programs on campus to actually recruit candidates who are service-disabled veterans, wounded warriors.
Okay.
Good stuff. All right, so yet another panelist this morning who went to work thinking that it was going to be a different day, and here he is. Tom Webb will be with us. He is the deputy for the Army's, sorry, I'm looking at my shorthand. The deputy for the Army's Warrior Transition Command.
Yes, ma'am.
He is a 25-year veteran who's been with this command for 3 years.
Yes, ma'am.
And he is going to be sharing the Army's perspective.
Yep,
Excellent,
absolutely.
thank you.
Well, I appreciate it, ma'am. Yes, I got a call late last night, and so I really didn't have an icebreaker coming in here this morning. And I sat down and it presented itself to me. Those in my organization can tell you I'm probably not the most IT savvy individual walking the block. So forever put the access info for the month of April right in front of my microphone this morning. Well played. I don't know who Mr. or Mrs. Pewguest or Mr. Guest is, but I look forward to meeting them sometime today, and I'll leave that right there. Well, I do appreciate the opportunity to talk to you this morning, and I think the way the panel is laid out is very logical. Mr. Kelly talking about DOL, Mr. Gladney talking about the VA and the programs that they have together at the strategic and operational level. What I'd like to give you is the tie-in. We're talking about the collaboration and the networking. Talk to you about how specifically the Army runs their program and how we take advantage of some of the programs available at DOL, VA, and really just out there on the network. It's interesting, our moderator talked about decoding and demystifying, and hopefully what we'll take away from all this is that the decoding and the demystifying is actually pretty simple. And I'll talk to that in my concluding comments. I'll talk to you about three things: how our program is structured, how we actually work the transition, and then some ongoing initiatives and challenges that we have. The formal part of the Warrior Care and Transition Program started back in 2009 with the command being stood up here in DC, actually down in Alexandria. But our Warrior Transition Units were actually started to be stood up back in 2007. We have a total of 38 units. We have 29 what we call Warrior Transition Units and 9 what we call community-based Warrior Transition Units. The Warrior Transition Units are affiliated with major camps, posts, and installations that you all are probably familiar with, Fort Bragg, Fort Drum, Fort Campbell. The community-based programs are in places out in the community, places like Park City, Utah, places like California. And the intent of those programs is that we can take our reserve component soldiers and families that we're taking care of and basically return them to their hometowns and communities so that they can enjoy the support network that they left once they came on to active duty and return to that support network and benefit. So again, we're talking about the network and the collaborating. So our 38 units, okay, the intent of those 38 units is to get the soldier, his or her family, and their network back closest to home. We take care of wounded, ill, injured, okay, so it's not just combat injured soldiers from the current conflict. It's soldiers that are sick, soldiers that get injured in training. And we take care of active guard and reserve. Okay, our population today is right around 8,900. We've been, for several years, hanging around 10,000, but we're about 8,900 today. I have a cadre of 4,000, okay, a combination of military and civilians that take care of those soldiers inside our program. And that denominator has stayed pretty consistent over the years. What continues to increase is the numerator, okay? So since 2007 when we stood up, okay, about 52,000 soldiers have left our program, okay? About 50% of them have actually returned to the force, they're active, they're guard, they're reserve unit, and about 50% of them have transitioned to veteran status. The mission of the soldiers and really the families while they're inside the program is to heal. Okay, they're not with their infantry unit, they're not with their logistics or aviation unit, they're in the Warrior Transition Unit, and their mission is to heal. And as they go through the course of the days and weeks and months as they're embarking on that mission to heal, usually generally during the course of the day, they're going to do one of three things. Okay, they're going to be in rehabilitation. All right, almost all my soldiers in my program are outpatients. They come to me after their inpatient phase. They're rehabilitating, they're conditioning, and I hesitate to say that's just physical conditioning. We have an adaptive reconditioning program, all right, and it truly is about mind, body, and spirit. Okay. And then they're involved in training, okay? Ultimately, we have to transition these soldiers, okay? We're either going to transition them back to the force or we're going to transition them to veteran status, okay? For those going back to the force, all right, there's an intent to ensure that they're maintaining their proficiency, okay? So that infantryman, might spend part of the day with the infantry unit. Okay, some of them have to reclass. They can't do infantry armor, some of the other branches anymore. They'll reclass, and they'll have the opportunity to do some training in that new branch that they're going into. And then, of course, as I said, about 50% of them will transition to veteran status. So what do I have in place to support that transition? Okay, out of that 4,000 folks, I have a multidisciplinary team, OTs, PTs, licensed clinical social workers, transition coordinators. And I'll talk to you about what they do, the program that they put these soldiers through in just a minute. But they do workshops. We do resume preparation workshops. We do interview skill workshops. As I indicated, part of that multidisciplinary team is our transition coordinators, especially for those that are leaving service. Do you have everything that you need to have to actually transition? And then we take advantage of other programs that other departments, Department of the Army runs, and I'll talk about those in just a moment. The core of our transition, the second thing I wanted to talk about, is a comprehensive transition program. It's a multi-phase program, and what I'd like you to take away today is that program is based on 6 domains: career, physical, emotional, social, family, spiritual. Okay? And then we have steps that we go through, all right, in the execution of this comprehensive transition plan. Okay, in a nutshell, when we bring them in, we ask them to see yourself in terms of those 6 domains, and then with that multidisciplinary team, work to develop that goal of where you want to be, all right, and then put the processes in place to achieve that end state. Okay, and that is for every soldier in my program. Okay, and we include the families in development of that goal because they are an integral part of the process. And I'll tell you, I'm speaking from the Army perspective, but for your benefit, our program is not atypical. Each of the services have one, and generally a lot of the things I'm speaking about is germane to the other service programs as well. Mr. Gingrich talked last night, and I've had the pleasure of working with him for about the last year on a VA initiative that we're working on. And he talked about, you know, what do we want out of our respective programs? What do we want for our veterans? And so I'll tell you that ours is based on an aspirational model. Again, going back to that comprehensive transition plan, okay, building that word picture of where you are and where you want to be, all right, and then helping you to get there, okay? And we've heard the word collaboration quite a bit today, and so we do collaborate with quite a few organizations. With inside the Army, all right, strong ties with the Army G1, our proponent for within the Department for Transition, and as Mr. Kelly alluded to, they really are the keeper of the Army Career and Alumni Program, which is executing what we're offered from DLL and VA before all soldiers are discharged. And what the Army G1 does for us is make sure that all of our soldiers, like all the soldiers leaving the Army, have everything that's required for VAL, and that's pretty powerful. The Department of Defense, we work very closely with them, and one of the neat things that they offer us is federal internships, and we have about 600 soldiers right now actually out there as part of their work program that I talked about, okay, that are doing, working with different federal agencies. It's pretty powerful, and probably one of the best success stories I'll talk to you about is young soldier we recently had, military police sergeant that was severely injured over in Afghanistan, severe burns and whatnot, did a internship with the DEA. Okay, he was discharged, so his internship with the DEA ended, but because of his experiences, because of reputation and network he built up, he was immediately hired by the FBI, all right, and is thriving, working with the FBI right now. Pretty powerful. We work with the installations, again, the work programs, to make sure we're taking advantage of opportunities on the military installations to make sure that, you know, especially for those folks that are transitioning, we can get them used to getting into programs that they're probably going to be perhaps not familiar with, having served as an infantryman, artilleryman, police soldier. We have an incredibly strong relationship with the Veterans Affairs. Working the process right now to ensure that we're working collaboratively before the issue 214 through the 214 to make sure that transition is seamless. And Mr. Gladney talked about Voc Rehab, and I've got my Chief of Career and Education Readiness Branch with me, Nancy Adams, And we actually have a meeting with your folks tomorrow afternoon to review where all our voc rehab counselors are to make sure that we have comprehensive coverage. And that program is going great, I tell you. And then we've had an incredible partnership, sir, with the DOL for many years now. And one thing I've challenged, you talk about the network, talk about collaboration. One thing I've challenged my folks is when a soldier leaves our program by virtue of the issuance of a 214, confirm to me that he or she knows where that DVOP and that lever is once they get home to Haymarket, Virginia, okay? Because I know where it is, because I went on the website and checked, okay? And I know there's 75 of those DVOPs and levers in Virginia. There's 77 in Pennsylvania. There's like 175 in Texas. I've never been to Texas, but I heard it's big. But, I mean, the folks are out there. So what are we doing? What are my folks doing to make sure, okay, that we are taking advantage of this network, all right, before they leave our charge? I'll gear towards my last comments, ongoing initiatives and challenges. Everything we do, I mean, it's geared towards education empowerment. I had breakfast with a young soldier, a reservist, and with his wife. And I asked him, I said, if I give you clarity on what comes next once you get discharged, would that help with what you're going through right now? And he looked at me and was like, well, of course, sir. I was like, okay, I was just trying to confirm that. But the more that we can empower these young men and women, we can educate them on what's coming next, the better off they're going to be. That's, anecdotally my observation. How do we return them back to their hometowns and communities? How do we take advantage of that collaboration? How do we really tap into that network? We've heard it a couple times already. But and I ask my folks, I challenge my folks, when they get back to where they're going, okay, and one thing Nancy makes me smart on things, and anecdotally, she's told me that I really want to prove this because it'll help us with our problem statement, but anecdotally, she's told me that 75% of our soldiers go home, okay? And, Webb went home, so when they do go home, how do we make sure that they got situational awareness on all the opportunities that are out there, all the providers that are out there, all the opportunities that are available to them? Is it an IT solution? I'm not sure. It's just IT. We talked yesterday and we heard about the human touch quite a bit. Justin talked about that. And so I think it's probably a combination of the IT and then, that human interface. For my program, is it simply preparation? Okay? I think not. Okay, because that journey doesn't end at the 214. Okay, that journey continues, as Mr. Gingrich talked about last night. For some of these folks, I mean, that journey, that dependency on the different programs we have is going to continue for 67 years, if not a lifetime. That 214 is but a blip on the radar. I'll take my cues from the back there, and I'll wrap up my comments. But I'll tell you what we try to do is we transition folks, and we take advantage of the other programs that are in place in order to assist and make sure that we're preparing these young men and women to do that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Webb. And then there's this song, it just keeps going. And I hear collaboration and partnering. Last but certainly not least, and yet another person who probably went to work today thinking he was going somewhere else. Lieutenant Colonel Forbes from the Office of Warrior and Family Support on Joint Staff. His boss reports to the chairman of the Joint Chiefs of Staff. Their rolling mission is outreach. And you want to talk about collaboration. Their rolling mission is outreach on education, wellness, healthcare, and employment. He goes out and talks with communities about how to collaborate and how to bring resources together so that at the end of the day, veterans and service-disabled veterans get reintegrated into communities. So Lieutenant Colonel Forbes.
Good morning. First, I just want to thank the Woodruff Foundation and IVMF for hosting this and giving me this opportunity to excel this morning. So thank you very much. As was mentioned, I work for a gentleman by the name of Colonel Anthony Henderson, Office Warrior Family Support, where our primary focus in the mission is we focus on grassroots within the communities. So where basically, if you look at it, what we go out to America outside of the Beltway, outside of the bases and installations across America. This initiative began under the previous chairman, a gentleman by the name of Michael Mullen, Admiral Michael Mullen, where Admiral Mullen was touring the country, what was called a conversation with the country. Those were basically town hall meetings. A reoccurring theme in these town hall meetings, from going to New York City to Beaumont, Montana, to Idaho, Boise, Idaho. But so from these large cities down to these small towns and communities. Reoccurring theme that kept coming out from these interactions, the American people kept coming back to him saying, hey, who in Washington, D.C., we want to help. We've been at war, we want to help. So who do I help? Who is my point of contact within Washington, D.C., within the government? After giving this some thought, Admiral Mullen pretty much came back and said, hey, what needs to happen is I need you communities to keep your assets and resources within those communities. I need you to focus on the reintegration. Tom Webb had mentioned, 75% of us go back home, wherever home is. So he was saying, I need you to put your assets and resources together in a collaborative effort. There's that word again, a collaborative effort based off of your niche, talking with one another to help the Tony Forbeses, and the other military members reintegrate into the community. So that's primarily our focus in terms of the mission, and that's how it was initiated. Well, when Admiral Mullen left, General Dempsey, the current chairman, said, hey, this is right, this is the right thing to do, so we continued this. And we continue this until today. Now, I also want to mention that I've got two team members here. They're on the Army staff, Lieutenant Colonel Smith and Major Fielder, and they're working with the Soldiers for Life. So this is where the current CENTCOM commander, General Austin, and the current Chief of Staff of the Army, General Odiero, said, hey, we need to do something like this as well, and focus it a little bit more on the Army and get the Army focused to where you have heard of other programs with the other services, whether it's Marine for Life, for example. So the Army has stood up now Soldiers for Life, and they're pretty much doing the same thing, but have a bigger, or have an influence onto the Army itself, to where the Joint Staff does not, because our principal role is to advise, thus we elect to go outside into America. Primary purpose, what we look at doing is just educating the American community. Educate them on, who is the military? You get questions, and address the perception. Many of us can talk about the perception, that infantrymen, there's a different perception between you look at an infantryman and you look at an aviator, okay? I mean, there is a perception. Well, it's more than that, and we all understand about those intrinsic leadership attributes that all members of the military have. Our focus, so when I go out and speak to the communities, I encourage them to educate themselves on the existing programs, the existing government programs, whether it's from Department of Labor, whether it's from the Veterans Administration, whether it's from Department of Education. So gain an understanding of those programs, both at the federal and state level. Once they understand those programs, I encourage them then to look at how they can fill those gaps. So harness those resources at the state and federal level, understand those resources, and then at that point, that's where you apply your efforts down at the community, at the grassroots level, with those limited assets and resources that you have. Now, yes, there will still be some existing gaps, and we understand that, but I will argue that the gaps are less now, and you can actually focus, other resources, or look at other means of focusing on those gaps. And also, we look at enduring effects. We call them enduring effects. Tom said lasting. It's the same difference. It's giving getting them employment, making sure they have proper health care, but it's enduring, so that they are not have reintegrated into the community and are proper citizens of America. We also believe that we have an opportunity. Tom Brokaw, this is where I go and speak to everyone, and I say, look, Tom Brokaw wrote about the greatest generation. So I also encourage the communities to look at it from a position of, whatever your niche is. And again, our focus here is on employment and disabled or disabilities. So when I talk to the communities, I also go to the foundations. I go to the local level employers. And I encourage them that they have an opportunity. Tom Brokaw, it took him 60 years to write the book about the greatest generation. Well, we have an opportunity to harness these veterans and, arguably, and I know people have heard this, make the next greatest generation. But it's an opportunity, and I try to educate them. We try to educate them on that. Let me also say that our definition of a veteran, and this is very important for us, it's very different from what the VA's definition and the other governmental departments have. Our definition within the office is those that have worn the uniform, our spouses, the family members, the families of the fallen, and our caregivers. So, and we actually define that or call that our military family. That's important, because so many people associate things with, wounded warriors. Well, yeah, that they are part of the family. But again, it's getting them to come together in a collaborative effort and understanding the issues. The biggest asset and resource that this office has is, I pick up the telephone, hey, my name is Tony Forbes, I work for the Special Assistant to the Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff. I mean, all of us are kind of like in DC, we're kind of, yeah, okay, whatever. But I would tell you, when I make that pitch out in the civilian community, people listen. So we work as a magnet. We get them to understand our issues and get them to come together. And then we're able to connect individuals and organizations with other individuals and organizations across the nation that they normally would not have been able to, so that they can work together. Hey, I want to, we worked with the state of Nevada where they put together what they call the Green Zone Initiative. It addresses the homeless issues. We worked with Charlotte Bridge Home, where a community has come together. A community came together and said, the employers have said, hey, look, for us to maintain competitive in the world market, I need these type of people. I need you to train these type of people. So what they've done is, they got together, the employers got together with the educators, had them come together with a new program in the education, get the veterans in there, get them into the educational institution, train them on what the companies need in that local area, give them internships, graduate, and then they put them into the program, and they see themselves now being competitive with the veteran population. Just real quick, I was given my time. Our issues right now that we see is one question we get when we travel is, how do I attain accessibility? How do I connect with that veteran population? Meaning, how do I get access to the bases and installations so that the employers can access? We haven't answered that yet. How do we maintain momentum? I've had some of the conversation with here. I mean, eventually America's view on the war, I mean, as, hey, Iraq is over, Afghanistan is over, so that interest, that bell curve will start coming down. Our belief is it's going to come down, but how do you influence it to it doesn't bottom out? So it's coming down, but how do you influence it so it doesn't bottom out? And then the last thing is, how do you address the cultural change within the military? What I mean by that within the military is our role and mission is to fight and win the nation's war. But I will argue that from day one, DOD, the United States military, we're making a veteran from the beginning. So how do we change that culture? How do we start educating our leadership to start coaching, teaching, and mentoring those individuals, especially at the 2-year mark, at the 1-year mark, that they're thinking about getting out of the military, so that we can hand them off in the transition process for the reintegration. So that's my time, I believe.
Well, please join me in giving a round of applause for our speakers.